Good afternoon. Welcome to the Understanding Your Wood Windows session for the 2021 Northern Kentucky Restoration Weekend. We're excited to have you back today on this awesome Sunday. My name is Elisha Chamberlain, and I'm going to serve as your moderator for this session. Please use your chat function of the Zoom to ask for questions throughout the presentation. Please also let us know through the chat if you have any problems hearing or seeing the speaker. We'll do our best to help you out. So today, our speaker is Jim Turner. In 2000, Jim Turner spent 2 weeks at the Pine Mountain Settlement School that changed his life. From that time on, Mr. Turner saw the reality of historic preservation through the actions of many hands at work, building and restoring that which was built years before. Over the past 20 years, Turner Restoration has worked on the restoration of steel and wood windows in treasured historic houses and commercial buildings. One last time before Jim gets started, please use the chat for any questions or comments you have. I will be passing them along to Mr. Turner as he's doing his work. All right, Jim.
Good afternoon. How are you? I'm Jim Turner. And I want to talk about let's start out talking about the format of the presentation. We're probably going to hit about 4 different areas or 4 different subjects. We're going to initially start with the jargon, window jargon, or the anatomy of a double hung window, a wooden window. And that really is identifying the parts of the window. Then we're going to step into just a short session on what was left off in the presentation when we talked about historic windows and their energy efficiency, how a functioning and properly fitting wood storm can be as efficient or more efficient than new windows or as a replacement. Then we want to get into the functionality of how do we change and make these changes to a varnish type window. There are several tools that you see in front of you, a ratcheting screwdriver, a 1/2-inch scraper, a thin pry bar, a ball peen hammer, or a regular hammer. This we have is a carbide scraper. Carbide scraper you can buy today at Lowe's or Home Depot for about $14.95. The only caveat is that the blades for these are about $6 alone. I use, when I'm cutting glass, and we will be cutting glass in this section and doing some glazing, I use a barrel oiled cutting knife or cutting blade with a diamond tip blade. If you're going to be doing that, you also will need an assortment of nippers, glass nippers, to break the glass after cutting. And when you're cutting glass or measuring, please do cut. It is not difficult, but do cut with a square so that you're getting a straight line. And if you don't have a square, make sure you measure properly from one end to the other and draw and have a flat piece of metal or wood to go from point A to point B. You take your barrel and you drew the cut. We'll demonstrate that later. Window jargon. As you are looking at the window, you are looking at the exterior part of the window with the storm. And in this storm, we have enough what is called a rabbet that we sit the storm in. And your original storms will be rabbeted also. It will have this rabbet that's cut so that you have at least a 1/2 inch or 1/4 of an inch of a rabbet on a storm. What does that do for you? It allows your storm window to fit on the exterior stop. And that fits well if we understand how wind blows straight ahead. So we are able to, with 190 to 90-degree turn, to reduce the velocity of the air that's coming into this space by 50%. If we put 2 turns in this window by having another stop or a break at the upper sash, we reduce that velocity till we almost still the air. So we eliminate the velocity of the wind, creating a dead air or soft air space between the exterior of the storm and the interior of the upper sash. So with that, In most cases, a replacement window is only going to allow you a 1/4 inch of space between two pieces of glass. Understand that glass has 1 R of resistance. So this piece of glass and this piece of glass add up to 2 Rs. In most cases, in a 1/4 inch insulated unit, you are probably going to receive of 2.65 or 2.85. And that's within a 1/4 inch of space. And every one that talks about energy efficiency in windows will tell you if you had only another 3/4 of an inch, you're going to get a greater R value or greater resistance. Understand that with your existing storms in your traditional windows, you have over 2.5 inches of space between the interior of your storm and the exterior of your existing sash. 2.5 inches against a 1/4 of an inch. And that 1/4 of an inch, they are charging you a premium price for. So I would recommend that you keep your existing storms, get them fitted properly so that they reduce the air between the exterior and the interior. This is an upper sash, part of the window that we have. For some reason, painters have failed to recognize that paint is not insulation. Paint is only paint. And we only paint those surfaces that are flat, not the corners and the edges of other surfaces where they meet. We want that separation so we have a properly fitting and properly operating window, sash. This portion right in here is called the check rail or meeting rail. It's where the upper sash and the lower sash meet. And in most instances, there is a lock here that holds those and squeezes those two sashes together. The bottom rail, again, the bottom rail of the upper sash and the top rail of the lower sash. Stiles are on the side of your window. And the stile is just the thing that rides in the jamb of the box of the window itself. And we want to keep our jamb side of our box clear of paint. Why? If we paint it, it will stick. If we keep it open and clear, and to keep them operating properly, really just get a stick of beeswax, get a soap bar, and just run a soap bar or beeswax along that track, and your windows will operate smoothly. So the problem I've seen in most instances, and what I've heard from most customers, is that they are tired of taking on and off storms. This storm is a traditional storm, but we can manufacture a storm that will allow you to remove the storm panel, upper glass or screen, from the inside. In that way, you can have a combo, a rich traditional storm that we cut another rabbet in here that we would place a panel, a storm or a screen so that you can replace them as you need. So gone are the days where you have to climb a ladder to the 3rd floor and have a sail of a storm in your hands trying to come down. Consider the combination storm screen option when you're doing that. My partner in New Albany, Indiana, Fred Amer, has manufactured combination and traditional storms for a number of homes, businesses throughout Kentucky and Indiana. The products that we use in that construction are either mahogany, African mahogany, Red Grandis, or Cepeda. We use those products because we know the reliability and durability of the wood species. Let's move on to what do you do if you have a window that you really want to restore yourself. And this is one that I've worked on a few occasions. In many instances, this unit and most of your units may look like this. On one side, the interior side, in most instances, is very well varnished. Here, we've taken off varnish in two ways, and I'll demonstrate those today. The exterior, we've taken off a lot of the paint, but we still have paint crackling at the top and some at the side. We'll demonstrate that with our speed heater strippers. And let's just get into that. If there aren't any questions about the window jargon, we'll move on. One method of removing varnish from the interior of the paint, interior of the sash, I am using just a bit of denatured alcohol. Denatured alcohol will dissolve the varnish as you wash it on. And really here, we're just washing varnish, denatured alcohol on the varnished areas. Taking it off, it's best to use, instead of a shop towel, it is best to use a Scotch-Brite pad or 4/aught steel wool. And you can just wash the film and the varnish off until it gets to the patina of your liking. This does take a bit of time, but for some of us, that time provides a great reward because it allows you to keep a certain patina of existing varnish or old varnish on the surface of your window. You can see some of that from the top as I'm going on. And it is, again, it is much easier to use 4/aught steel wool or a Scotch-Brite pad because you're going to be buffing the surface of the window as you're cleaning it off. But some of us really are not that patient and really just want to remove the finish. Then we move to the Scotch-Brite pad. Or Scotch-Brite pad is a remedy by just taking a carbide scraper and scraping our surface provides a very good method to get to a bare wood surface. As you do this, I haven't removed the hardware, but you should remove all the hardware as you're working. To that, you have an example of using denatured alcohol and steel wool. It is an effort. This is very heavy varnish. We had some scraping here earlier. Here, we just use a carbide scraper on both ends. Yes,
Jen, we have a question from William, and he has asked if denatured works on paint too.
no.
No.
Denatured alcohol will not work on paint. What we are doing, again, with the denatured alcohol, we are just dissolving the varnish that's on the surface. And we're able to take that down. I like it because I can take it down to the patina that I want the finish with. And that's basically the only reason I would use it. If you really want to remove everything, two best things is to just use a carbide scraper and scrape it, or here's another tool. You can use a speed heater. Now this heats up, it provides a radiant heat source, infrared heat source, and it's very hot, but it gives you about 2.5 inches of space between the heat source and the surface of the product that you're working with. This helps remove paint and varnish from most surfaces, and it does it in a manner that is lead safe. Throughout all of our processes, we have to look at and consider lead safety and try not to emit lead fumes. This allows us to do this. Most heat pieces of equipment are going to be something like and most of you know these, a heat gun. That heat gun is shooting out forcefully about 700 to 900 degrees of heat. I would not like to do that in a small space, in a concealed space that I don't know what's behind it. And in most walls of an older home, there is dirt and debris. I've seen, and if you can see a leaf in your air intake of your vehicle, there are leaves and broken debris, biology in the walls of the home. So it is better that I don't have that. And if I'm going to work with a heat gun in that, I need to have a squirt bottle with me. This source allows me to apply heat to the surface. And if I'm looking for, I can wait just a short period of time and then just remove that. I use a 5-in-1 to scrape the varnish off. I don't want this to start fuming. The fumes create lead, and puts lead in the air, so I don't want that to happen. And I'm right here at that point that I'm close to almost fuming, but getting it soft enough just to scrape it off. So I just apply it a little bit longer, probably 30, 40 seconds more. And then just use the 5-in-1 to scrape it off. If the 5-in-1 is too slow for you, and when you are done with it, because we have these bulbs, it's better to put it on its side and away from you and the area in which you're working. And get back then to removing the paint or heavy varnish so you have a smooth surface to sand. I would suggest that you do take that, sand it down to the finish you like. A 60 grit sponge sander works very well. And giving you a nice finish with an interesting grain pattern. Some of the paint, some of the varnish still within those tight grains. But when you take that, you wipe it down with a little bit of thinner or denatured alcohol. You pretty much see the kind of finish that you're going to get with the cleaning of that bottom rail. Now, in talking about the whole window again, we're talking about the jargon of a window. We have the storm, upper and lower sash. And we have, I mentioned the stop on the back part that this sits into. But most double hung windows do have two other components, three actually: the pulley, the ropes, and the weights. And some of you are going to ask, how do I work with the pulley system or a rope system on a double hung window? I'm going to have to ask that you use your imagination here. Okay, so this plane in this plane is my wall in my box of my window. On the inside of this, which is my wall that's lath and plastered, I don't want to have to take off my trim, my 3 inches of trim around the side or the jamb side, the head, and the bottom or apron of my window. I really just would like to take off the sash so that I can put from one of my ropes are broken or cracked or cut. I want to put new rope in. How do I do that? The trim that you have on the inside of your home typically is the finish stop. And let's see if we can turn you around here. That finish stop, I have it only one screw in, so I'm gonna pivot out this way. That finish stop holds the lower sash in place. And that's the purpose of the finish stop. Although the second purpose is it doesn't look like just a 1/2 by 3/4 piece of wood. It is finished out with an ogee or a nice curve, or in some most of the Craftsman style, it's a nice quarter round on that stop. That's about 2 inches, 1.5 to 2 inches deep in, that's holding my lower sash in place. I'm going to take off, and some of you, because you have, let's say, a Craftsman style or a bungalow style home, you may have the finish stop that is screwed with brass screws every 6 to 9 inches along its base with a little cap that's recessed into the stop. And some ask, well, what is the purpose for that? When some of you, it's nailed shut with a 6-penny, 1.25 inch, 1.5 finish nail. Most times, if you had the cap units and brass screws, there is an oblong slot that brass screw sits in. And when you undo that brass screw just a bit, you're able to move your stop, your finish stop, in a matter of a few inches, a 1/16 to 1/4 inch sometimes, and then tighten it back down. What that does for you is in the winter, as your wood shrinks, you're able to tighten the whole sashes together by sliding that in a 1/16 to 1/8 of an inch, and it tightens the sash together again, reducing the chatter and eliminating the air infiltration of that. But we take off this finish stop, and I generally practice taking off one at a time because it's easier for me then to handle my sash. I can take my lower sash, raise it, pivot it out so that I can work on one side of that sash. Okay. I pivot it out like that. I already have my sash tied and knotted. I'd say the rope is fine. But inside, what I want to show you is on the inside of that, what I've done to aid it better is I've taken my rope and I've knotted it and I've put it in a spiral, a 1/2-inch spiral wire, so that this rope is not going to pop out of this slot. Understand that our ropes are constantly under pressure. They're under pressure of this weight that's on this end of it. Someone eventually is going to ask, how do you really measure and know what the weight is on it? What weight do you use in your window? And also let me clarify that in your case, in your window, there is a pocket door here. That pocket door slot allows you to take the weight from in the box to the outside or to the inside space, and you can tie a weight on it. What I'm exhibiting here is stackable weights, new series of weights that you can get that are stackable in 2 pound, 1 pound, and 4 pound increments. So if you needed a 6 pound weight, you just put 2 of these together. That helps it stacks, and then it ties directly from one opening down through the next, and we would tie our knot in the bottom. But let's put this, let's not lose my rope. When we're putting and re-roping a window, one suggestion. I would suggest that you just go out to a hardware store, buy about 36 inches of chain, a small chain, about no larger than 3/8 of an inch in diameter. It could be ball chain, it could be chain, flat chain. Just buy some chain. We want to put a hook on the end of that chain. Or if not a hook, we just want to be able to tape the rope, the fresh end of the rope, to that chain. Once it's in this area where we pull the old weight out, and it's sitting waiting on the inside, waiting to be put on, what I want to do is just to be able to tie a knot in my rope so that it covers that hole there. But if I were you, I would tie a large knot in that rope because, again, weight is pulling on this all the time, just drawing it down and down and down. It is better to just do a knot or put, if you have the spirals, you can purchase the spirals, the 1/2-inch spirals from Blaine Window Hardware, Blaine, BLAINE, Window Hardware, and they're in Hattiesburg, Maryland. They do have an online catalog that you can go to, blainewindow.com, blainewindowhardware.com. Architectural Resources, most are in, they both are on the East Coast. Architectural Resources, I believe, is in Massachusetts. But you can get those, and what you would do the same thing I did with the spiral here. I tie a knot in it, put it at the bottom of my weight, and then I'm able to take my weight, pivot my sash again, stuff that sash back into the hole. I'd say easy as pie, but sometimes pie is difficult to make and bake also. So there we have it. Now, some are going to say, well, I don't know what size my weight is, and I don't know what size weight to order. If we take our sash off, you can use a simple bathroom scale. Just put your sash on your bathroom scale, and that is going to give you the weight of that window. That is the weight of the sash and the glass divided by 2, because you have 2 weights that you have to put on these windows, one on each side. And you divide that by 2. The weight of the sash divided by 2 gives you the weight of the window. I said that, and I did it rather easily, and I did it from basically the interior space of the window. If I'm honest with you, most of your windows are going to be painted shut, so you're going to need another tool, maybe a couple more tools. Use your utility knife, score your paint strip on both sides from top to bottom, along your stop and at the bottom. Most times there's paint pooled at the bottom, so make sure before you take your stop off that you scrape that bottom all the way to bare wood. If it's very difficult, get a flat, very thin pry bar, and slide that pry bar in between there to pop that out, so that it works its way out all the way. You're taking your sash out, again, I would take one side out at a time, particularly if you have a broken rope, because you can just repair one side if you need only one rope. Question is going to come up, well, how much rope do I need? Well, you have a lower sash. What is the operation of that lower sash? You have to raise it. So you're going to need a weight that will not bottom out when you raise your sash. And if you want your sash raised all the way up, you certainly don't want your rope bottoming out on your sash. So I would look at, if I looked at how my sash is and where my little hole is, it typically is 6 to 9 inches down from the top of the window. I would add that to the size of my window, add another 6 to 9 inches, and then measure from this point, the height of my window, to the midpoint of in my well, my window well that my weight is in. The size of my weight, typically on your old weights, it's going to be a 6 to 8 pound weight, depending on the windows that you have. The 6 pound weight is about 6 to 9 inches tall, sometimes taller. And a stackable weight, it will be less because, again, 1 pound each, 2 pounds, 3 of these stacked weights. If there are any questions, do send them in. We can answer those if you have anything. We're going to move on to cutting some glass and glazing. You don't? If you're looking for any documentation, what I would suggest is go to the National Park Service website, and you want to, in the keyword there is you want to look for preservation briefs. In the preservation brief section of the National Park website, you will find, I have a www.cr.nps.gov. Sometimes that works, sometimes it doesn't, but just go in National Park Service and go to that website, and then it will give you a ton of information on everything that you would want to know in those preservation briefs. Use that as a keyword once you're on the site. Preservation briefs, there are about 42 briefs that talks about everything relevant to an old historic home. Let's not just label it historic, just an old home, whether it is a shotgun, a craftsman, or a grand mansion. Everything you need to know, from masonry, tuck pointing, plaster repair, and the recipes for certain plasters and masonry products are all there for your enjoyment, right? Now, I have a grandson who just bought himself a fixer-upper, but most of the windows were gone. So Fred, there are a couple of sashes that were missing. So Fred made this mahogany sash for him. And when we talk about window anatomy, let's step back once. The bottom rail, a lot of people say, well, how do I tell the bottom rail or bottom sash from the upper sash? The bottom sash will always have about a 3-inch bottom rail. And typically a traditional window will have about a 2 1/4 inch upper rail. My styles will be evenly about 2 1/4 inches also in a traditional old window. The one thing that Fred asked me to do is check the width of the sash itself, because depending on a period in time, sashes were much thicker. And this is one instance that we started to make a set of windows or sashes that were thinner, and we had to make them thicker because of the size of the window. Now, what I've done here is that I've measured the interior part of the window from side to side and top and bottom. This is a casement window, so it's going to swing out. In a double hung window, the mistake that's made by most homeowners is they're always measuring the window short. And they measure it short by 1/8 of an inch. And when I was a young homeowner, I did this and took the pane of glass back, heated a little bit at the fact that the person at the hardware store painted my window, cut my window short. But he cut it to the measurements I gave him, because I measured from this part of the window to this part of the window. On a lower sash, the lower pane of glass goes up into the sash about 1/8 of an inch. So if you're measuring, do add 1/8 of an inch so that there's that slot that's cleared out that glass will slip into. Now for this pane, I used an old piece of glass that I just had and cut up. And I just fitted it, actually, put the glass to make sure that it fit into the space. There are a couple of things that you're going to need when you look at and think about glazing a window. Certainly glass, but if you can, look at old glass and try to save old glass, because most of the glass in your home is not going to be as, if you look at the side of this glass, you can see that it is almost yellow green as opposed to dark green the way new glass is. And that's because of the amount of iron oxide, I believe, that's in the glass when it's made. This glass is glass that was on an older building that was built in about 1932, between 1928 and 1932. If you saw glass in a building between 1920 and 1928, it would be much yellower, almost like a champagne yellow. And that because of the chemical that was made for the glass. I use an oil-based glazing compound always, and my preference is Sarco. Sorry, get my back, SARCO, Sarco glazing putty. And most people were surprised when I reach in my bucket and I come out with gray glazing putty. Sarco, well, I asked that the putty be dyed or darkened because I prefer to have a darker, most of the work that I'm doing is on darker windows, darker color windows. So I'd rather have a darker glazing putty because if I have to wait 28 days before I paint this, the beauty of that is that you don't have to wait that long with oil-based glazing putty and Sarco's putty. You can paint a window, not prime it and not prime the putty within 48 hours. I'm bedding this frame, and the bed to glass, I want to put a cushion of putty under the glass and then lay the glass on top of that. I used an older piece of glass also because my older piece of glass is going to be a little bit thicker than double strength glass. And it will give the appearance a more yellower appearance than, and meet the same kind of appearance as his existing windows in the house. Sometimes we look for that and we try to move toward that as we are looking at older buildings. And a number of older buildings, we've just saved glass to work that glass. If you're working in an older building, I would suggest that you save as much glass as possible. It's a cost savings for you, and it helps to kind of carry on that whole tradition of how about being a spendthrift. Now it looks like I'm putting an awful lot of glazing on the bed of the glass. I do want it to cover, and I do want it to ooze out. And I'll show you that in a second. I lay my glass down. Start at the base, pressing down. And I run my thumbs around the bed so that I get the glass oozing all the way out the edges. And creating a seal of the glass and the glazing, pressing as much air as I can out of it. That's what I generally have. Now I am going to be using the old regular small push pins that will hold the glass in place. These have what I call the little ears on them. With using my glazing knife, I take the pin and I'm going to put one in the center at the rail, at the bottom rail, and just take that point and keep my push pin flat to the glass and rock it. Since this is mahogany, it's a little hard to kind of get that push pin in. Again, I continue to keep pressure down on it, rock it. On the sides, I'm going to put 2 on the sides, about 4 inches, 4 to 5 inches apart. And that way I have the length of this sheet of glass is secure and sealed. This panel of glass is about 17 inches wide. So I have 8 inches on either side of the center. About 5 inches to the side, top and bottom. Now, the cleanup from the other side, we want to clean glazing off the inside. And I'm doing that for a particular purpose, because now as I glaze the exterior of the window, I have a line here that I glaze to, so that I can fall a 1/16 to 1/8 of an inch below that line that I paint to seal the glazing to the glass. So let's do one of those. When I complete that, I want my line to be seen so that I have a guide to paint to. Now, some people will create their rope or their snake and put that in and roll it up and put it across. I really just try not to do that. It takes a lot of time. If you just push it back and push it back to the to your line, you're going to have just the right amount of glazing.
Jim, while
Yes.
you're doing that, we did have a couple questions that
Very
came through on the Q&A, so I apologize for missing these. First question was, what was the name of the heat device you were using?
Speed heater.
A speed heater. All right, and then the other question was, I believe the gentleman missed the part where you were discussing why you would attach a chain to the ropes. Can you kind of touch back on that, please?
I'm using a chain to drop down into and over the pulley. Because if I use new cotton rope, when I pull it off the spool, what's gonna happen is it's gonna go down into this dark space that may be a lot of nails and spider webs and whatever down in here, because it's not as clean and pristine as my new window here. As I push it down, it's just gonna coil up here and I'll never see it. So I'm using the chain to act as a weight to pull the rope down to my weight pocket, and then I can tie it off at that point.
Perfect. And then the last of the questions, what is the cost of wooden storm windows?
the cost is going to vary according to the size of your window. And we're going to measure the size of your window, and it'll be generally a square inch cost. And it can range from average window, could be a $175 to $300, depending on the size, of $350.
Then we've got about 3 minutes left. We're
Okay.
excited to see how this goes.
If any other questions, just please ask them. We are cutting down here, finishing up. What I wanted to show you is that as I finish this glazing here, I think that you'll see the grade from the exterior, right? You see the gray line here? Now that is what I'm going to paint to, and that will give me an 1/8 of an inch seal on the glass and the glazing to the wood. So I have a good paint seal on my glass. I have a deep enough pocket and angle enough that water will shed away from the window. And when this dries, the beauty of this also, again, I said that your glazing will harden up within 48 hours because it is an oil-based glazing compound. The oils are released and they go to the surface. And as they come to the surface, they create a skin or a film on the top of the surface. The more oils that are compact and starts hardening, within 48 hours, you should have enough of a skin that you can paint over. If the skin is not thick enough, what will happen is the paint, as it starts to dry, it will start wrinkling and crinkling. So allow it a minimum of 48 days. I mean, it's 48 hours, but it would be best to let it rest a week before you try to put paint on it, so you have enough of a hard surface.
Then we have one more question.
Great.
What is the difference between rope and sash cord, and will paint hurt it?
Yes, paint will hurt it. It will hurt it a lot. It'll cause sash cord to be very brittle, and it could cause it to break prematurely. Sash cord is a fiber that is woven and kind of threaded in. It's cotton through and through, and it's tightly woven so that the weight of the cord does not allow the rope to stretch. It locks it in at a certain tension in a certain way. When you're using regular cord, that cord, because of the weight on it, the constant weight on it, will stretch. Most big box stores are selling rope, and sometimes they try to get you to buy, if you use a climbing rope or a plastic or fiber rope, use a cotton sash cord. Best place to find that is generally at a good Ace or Arco, old hardware store. You're going to find probably the best cord. Another resource is Killian's Supply, for if you want to do online ordering. They've been supplying homeowners with cord and red dot cord for years. This is the finished glazed product. All we need to do is clean up now.
Awesome. Well, Jim, can I just take you to my house so you can do all my windows for me?
Sure.
Thank you so much for this. This was very informative. All right.
Thank you.
And as you're watching Jim kind of clean up, I think we are going to go ahead and share a poll with you. This is our 7th poll, and our question is going to be, what is your biggest challenge in owning a historic house? Wow, can I just check them all? So you're gonna have about a minute to do this. While you're thinking about that and making your selection, and we do appreciate all of you participating and answering these poll questions. It helps us better answer questions in our different sessions this year, but also will help us plan for what we're gonna bring you next year. After this poll closes here in about 30 more seconds, you're gonna get to hear from our roofing sponsor, Kurt Ward with KHC. He is also a member of the Cincinnati Preservation Association.